question is, can we survive without technology? So it's good if you can see the screen. I know it's a bit unusual maybe for a retreat to have visual information coming at you, but your teacher is a visual person. So I think sometimes it's good to balance out our listening or our doing. Sometimes in the meditation retreats, when teachers giving talks, it's always words. So if you're not an oral person, sometimes it can be difficult. And because there's so many people who are new to Buddhism here, new to meditation, I thought we'd just have some pretty pictures to look at, which might make it a bit easier for things to kind of sink in. So, as you know, there's some skill sessions that we've got throughout the weekend. So they're basically simple ways that we can look at the Buddha's teachings and that we can take on board for our own practice and to help us in our lives. And the first one, congratulations. You've already done the first one, which is to come along on a retreat. So a retreat can mean many different things to many people. My sister, she is a fan of retreats, but she goes to these like Golden Door kind of places, like luxury retreats. I've been on retreats with her, and you kind of get pummeled for like 5 hours, by 10 hands or whatever. So this is not that kind of retreat. But what does it mean to retreat? So when I hear these words retreat, I think about stepping back, about taking a break, getting perspective, letting go, chilling out, detoxing. These are words that I kind of think of when I hear the word retreat. But there's a particularly Buddhist word that we can use for retreat, which is renunciation, or in the ancient language of the Buddha, nekkhamma. So some of you might know this. Renunciation, nekkhamma. This is considered a right intention, a right thought, a right motivation that we can develop on the Buddhist path. It's the second factor of the Buddha's Eightfold Noble Path. And the intention is really important when we come on a retreat. If we come on a retreat voluntarily willing to give some things up by following precepts, by stepping away from our usual world, then we can expect some good results, because this is a correct intention, a right intention that will help us to develop the mind. Because what is it that we're usually stepping away from? It's all those things that keep us busy out there in the world. It's all the activity, all the stress, all the problems, as well as all the things that delight us, that attract us, that keep us craving, consuming, shopping, going out, meeting friends, doing this, doing that, being busy, all this stuff that keeps us away from our mind. And so sometimes you might have gotten this just from the short letting go meditation we just did. Sometimes there's some peace that can come from letting go, from retreating, from renouncing. And this peace can actually grow to be very big. But here's an example of the kind of peace you might be able to experience in your own life. This freedom that comes when you no longer have to do something. And you can see this woman there, she is literally drooling with bliss. The bliss of not being busy. So it's quite a good thing to let go of the busyness that we have in life, to stop ourselves from just going around in this cycle of having things to do. I used to live in the nightclub area in Sydney. I'm from Sydney, and don't hold it against me, Perth. It was the kind of area where there's so much to do. You always go out for dinner, go out for music, go out to nightclubs, go out, go do this, do that, do this, do that. And I wasn't really ever much at home. So I was kind of living in the middle of the city and very busy all the time. Activities, people, brunches, all of the good things in life. And I never stopped. You didn't stop. But when I did stop, when I came to the Buddhist monastery, I remember thinking, gosh, I've been living at a frenetic pace. I've been living at a pace that is beyond human, you know. When you come to the monastery, you come to Jhana Grove, you start to live more at a human pace, a pace which is more in tune with nature. So there's this kind of tuning up with nature, tuning up with reality, you know, just to be okay with not being busy, to step away from all that stuff that keeps you in the world. All of this stuff is usually sensory pleasures. So sometimes when you hear Buddhists talk about Buddhism, they say things like sensory pleasures, and it sounds like, you know, fire and brimstone, don't indulge the senses, this kind of thing. But actually, these things can cause us problems in our lives. So when I think about my previous life, my friends, my family, they're all caught up in this busyness. And it starts with the senses. There's a famous, for Buddhists, sutta, some of the Buddhist words, called the Mahadukkha Khandha Sutta. And these words mean the great mass of suffering. And he says, so it sounds pretty grim, doesn't it? He says that the suffering in our life starts with sense desire, with wanting things. He says the problem is that when we want stuff, we have to go out and we have to work, and this is there's dangers in this. When we go out and we work, we could get sunburnt, we could get hit by a car. When we go out and we work, we encounter many difficulties, many problems, and we're working to get the stuff that we want. And the stuff that we want, other people want too, so we have to compete for it. Once we get it, we're worried that someone's going to take it away from us, that someone's going to steal it, or someone's going to get in the way of us having it. And so we worry about the stuff that we've got. This is suffering. And then conflict can happen. Your sister steals your phone. Your partner takes your favorite thing, and you get upset. Or the family quibble over the inheritance. So this is what the Buddha says, you know, these problems that come from the things that we usually have in our sense desire realm. And then this doesn't just happen to us, but it happens on a large scale. So conflict in society, people going to war, competition for resources. So this is not only happening in the past, in the Buddha's time, but happening today. The competition for resources is what people will go to war for in the future as well. Ajahn Sujato, who's a famous monk from Bodhinyana and internationally also, gave a talk just last week at Bodhinyana Monastery about the end of the world. And it was the literal end of the world. You know, not just, you know, one day the world will end in 1 billion years, but, you know, soon. And he was talking about the apocalypse. What's going to happen at the end? How are we going to live as people, as Buddhists? How are we going to live when there's no water, when people are fleeing global warming? Well, it's really heavy stuff. And this is the kind of thing the Buddha was talking about. You know, we can't all indulge our sense desires to the extent that we do in the West. The rest of the world wants to do the same. It's sense desires. Over and over again, this wanting, this craving, destroying our natural resources, all of this stuff is what causes conflict and problems in our lives. And you can see it in your own life in small ways. The stuff that we want, the stuff that we carry around. I don't know if any of you have moved house recently and you've kind of thought, what have I got here? And this stuff is heavy. This stuff is a burden to you. We carry it around. That's why there is a little bit of bliss when we put down that burden for a little while when we come on retreat. There's a funny story I remember about Ajahn Lee Damodaro, who's a Thai forest monk. He once led a retreat and he was going with a bunch of lay people, and they were catching a train to the retreat destination. So they all turn up at the train station, and he takes one look at them, and they've got luggage like you wouldn't believe, like large suitcases. And he takes one look and thinks, no. And he says, we're walking. And so all these people are like, And so they start walking, following the railway tracks. And then, he turns around and sees people zipping open their luggage, throwing things out, keeping on going, throwing more things out as they went along, until finally he thought, okay, they've gotten rid of enough. And then at the next station, they got on the train. The point being, how much do you need to survive? I saw you coming along today here to Jhana Grove Retreat Centre. I saw you carrying cases of luggage. We should have thrown it in the campfire. But just think, what is it that you need to survive? What have you got in your luggage? Don't tell me, I don't want to know. But think about this. What is it that made you bring all these things along with you? At the end of the retreat, have a serious look at your luggage and think, what did I use? What did I not use? What do I really need? So as a Buddhist monk, when I go traveling, I take my bag and my bowl. I take my robes, one set. We get one set of robes, my sangati, my outer robe, maybe my computer. But that's it. Like two wings of a bird, Buddha says. The monk travels content with his robe and his bowl. So that's not just me being spiritually smug and trying to make you feel bad, but monks, nuns model a contentment, showing that it's kind of possible to live in this world without little, with little, without a lot, with little, and still be content. So what is it that we're craving? What is it that we're trying to get? What is it that we're working hard for? What is it you go to work for? My sister, my friends, I see their lives. They're working to get money to pay for a house that they're never in, because they're working to get money to pay for a house. Children in childcare. They're wealthy people, but they're so poor, always wanting more, always spending what they've got. They've got a big mortgage. They are worried about losing their job. This is suffering. These things that we want, these things that we carry, these things that we own, they end up owning us. So this is the problem. This is the problem that the Buddha saw, which is why he recommends renunciation, letting go, seeing what you can do without. It's not just the physical stuff that we carry around, though. It's the emotional stuff too. So when you were sitting there today thinking, in your meditation, you were thinking, weren't you? Yeah? What were you thinking about? Usually things about the past, things about the future, problems, problem people, difficulties, guilt, remorse. Oh, you're thinking about what you can do as soon as you get out of here, planning, grasping the future. So these are the things that we carry around with us, and these are burdensome to us. At the end of that meditation, I asked, did you feel any peace? Did you feel any peace? Did you feel any peace? Did you feel any pleasure in letting go of some of that stuff? Could you feel a sense of lightness? And this is what is possible when we take a step away from our usual life. We can see what is it that we actually need to be happy? What is it that we need to feel content? What is it we need to survive? So this is our problem, basically. We can't see. We can't see what it is that we need. We're kind of trapped in this pattern of behaviour. I'm going to be telling some stories as we go throughout the retreat. They're all drawn from the suttas, the words of the Buddha. So the story that kind of comes to my mind when I look at this image is the story about Ratapala, who was a monk, and he was talking with a particular king. So kings, as you know, rich, they have treasures, they have everything they want, they have all the pleasures of the world, and yet still, just like you and me, there's this little, I don't know, at the back of their head. And so one day, Venerable Ratapala was talking to King Kauravya, and he was saying, you know, there's so many problems with this world. And the king was like, yes, tell me about them. And he said, well, the first problem with our world is that it's swept away. Nothing lasts. Everything is swept away. And the king says, oh, yes, yes, yes. What do you mean? And the Venerable says, well, you're an old man now, Your Majesty, but when you were young, could you ride an elephant? And the king says, oh, yes, I was the best elephant rider. No one could ride an elephant like me. I was the best, number one, kind of like a Donald Trump. And the Venerable says, but what about now? Now that you're old? And he says, well, no, I couldn't ride an elephant now. Now, if I try to put my foot there, it goes over there. And this is old age. This is what happens. And so the Venerable says, well, this is what it means. Everything is swept away. We can't hold on to anything. We can't hold on to our youth. Everything in our life will be swept away. Everything that we have, that we define ourselves as being young people, being old people, will have to change. This is the nature of our life. All the things that we attach to, they'll have to change too. And then the king says, okay, tell me more. And the Venerable says, there is no shelter or protector in our life. And the king says, yes, what do you mean? And the Venerable says, when you've been sick, have you ever been sick? Yes, very sick. Could you give other people your pain? Could they take away your sickness? No, I had to be sick all by myself. No one could help me. This is the same thing, he said. When you are sick, no one can help you. And in this life, no one can help you. You're on your own. There is no person to protect you. There's just you. You are the one who has to bear all of these things. So old age, sickness. And the next one, probably know, is death. So the Venerable says, do you have a lot of gold and treasures in your palace? Yes, I'm very rich. I've got so much gold. And then when you die, what will happen to that gold? Oh, well, I guess I can't take it with me. So there is no owner in this life. All the things that we own, including our bodies, we can't keep. When we die, it's gone. all the things that we're collecting, all the things that we're shopping for, we can't take with us. So why do we put so much attention on these things? Why do we grasp at these things so tightly? And then the last thing that Venerable Ratapala talks to the king about is, he says, this world, all these sense pleasures, they're insatiable. Can't get enough of them. And the simile he gives to the king is, if someone came along and said to you, there's a kingdom over there full of wealth, full of treasures, what would you do? Oh, well, I'd go and invade it. What if someone says there's another kingdom over there? Yes, I'd invade that one too. And this is like us in some ways. You know, we always want things. We want a better job, a better car, a better phone, a better partner. We want better things for ourselves. All the time we want more and more and more. And we can't escape it. This is our insatiable craving for things. And this is the problem that we have. We're never satisfied. We are like a dog with a bone. This is from the Patalaya Sutta, one of the most famous of the Buddhist suttas. Our craving for things is like a dog with a bone. The bone doesn't have any meat on it. It's just got the taste. So when we see a dog chewing on a bone, you might think they're having a good time, but they're just trying to get more and more out of that bone, just like we are trying to get more and more out of our life. But all we ever get really is the taste. We never get satisfied. We never get full, in the same way that that dog is not going to get full by eating a bone. Another image that comes to my mind is scrolling through Facebook or Tinder. I don't know if you use Tinder. Never satisfied. What? You just keep scrolling forever. When is it going to end? This is what our life is like. We just go on and on and on like this, craving, wanting more, but never satisfied. Another image from this sutta is the image of hawks fighting over a scrap of meat. You know, the pleasures that we have in our life, we have to compete for. It's a very hard world out there. Like I said, I'm from Sydney. If you're from Sydney, it's compulsory to talk about real estate. So when you turn up to a rental inspection in Sydney now, there's like 50 or 60 people all looking at the same property. We're like these birds fighting over these things. This is what our life is like. There must be some good news somewhere. and the good news is that we are on a spiritual journey. You, me, the people in this room, we've maybe thought about these problems a little bit and thought, well, hang on a second, there must be some sort of solution here. There's an unease in us, an unease that drives us towards the spiritual path. And it may be that your path is like this one at the bottom here. You might think, you know, really tough being a spiritual person. But the way that we're going to have a good spiritual path like this one here, with a few ups and downs, is to have spiritual friends, spiritual friendships. So for us, it's really important to develop, as you're here, with the people around you, a sense that you're not alone on your spiritual journey, that you're supported, that people are also walking this path with you. As I said before, the spiritual friend, their purpose is to lift us, to take us, push us slightly, very gently in the right direction. And for us, it can be a bit mystifying. Perhaps we're here going around in circles, but if we have a spiritual friend, they're going to show us the right way to go. And the original Kalyana Mitta, the original spiritual friend, was the Buddha, and he walked the path, and then he showed people how to walk the path too. And he gives another beautiful image, which is of two people. going to a mountain. So one person climbs up the mountain and somehow shouts down to the other person, "Oh, I can see so many things from up here." Maybe they use their phone, I don't know what they did in Buddha's time. But the person down below can't see any of the things that the person up on the mountain can see. They're stuck down there in the forest. All they can see is trees and rocks. And the person up on the top of the mountain is saying, "You just see all the things up here. I can see lakes, I can see palaces, I can see fields, I can see mountains, I can see so far." And the person down there at the bottom of the mountain would be mystified, wouldn't believe that these things exist. And so the first person comes back down the mountain, drags the other person back up the hill and says, "See now, look." And then they too can see these lakes, these palaces, these fields. So this is the perspective. In Buddhist terms, this is the right view that we can obtain when we have a spiritual friend, someone to show us what's really there, the things that we can't see. So this is the gift of having a spiritual friend, that we see things that we didn't see before, that our view becomes transformed by their mere presence. And even being here this weekend, this short time, we are going to absorb the goodness of the other people around us. We're going to become fragrant with their goodness, with their good qualities, just by being around these people, in the same way that you wrap a piece of sandalwood in some fabric. The fabric takes away the smell. This is what it's like to be around good spiritual people. We see the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they act, the way they think, and it benefits us because we can see that there's a different way of being in the world. So that's the importance of having a spiritual friend. And so we can trust people like the Buddha, we can trust people like Ajahn Brahm, who have walked the path for a very long time, that when they talk about things, they know what they're talking about. They've climbed the hill and they're looking out, and the things that they've seen, they can teach us about, and we can learn and benefit. So this is the advantage of having a spiritual friend. This is the advantage, actually, of stepping back from the world for a few moments, coming on a retreat. The perspective that you get once you're away from your home, once you're away from your family, once you're away from your furniture, your phone, your belongings, all the entanglements, all of the difficulties, all of the pleasures, once you're away from those things, you have a bit of perspective. And what do you see? What do you see from the top of a mountain looking down? Everything is transformed. The things that you used to think that were right here in front of you were so big, so important. All of these things that you think are you, that define you, all of these things from the top of a mountain suddenly seem very small. Very small. The way you look at things is transformed. There's a beautiful set of similes by the Buddha where he talks about this ancient sage that used to live, whose name was Araka. And this sage lived in a time where humans had immeasurably long lifetimes. They lived for thousands of years. And this teacher still said, human life is like a dewdrop on a lotus leaf. It quickly fades in the sunlight. All of these kind of almost cliche images that we have about Buddhism, this is where this comes from. So human life, our life, is like a dewdrop. It's like a water bubble that pops. It's like a line drawn in the water. As soon as you draw the line, it vanishes. It's like a fast-flowing river. Flows so quickly. changing constantly. He says it's like a slither of meat thrown into a hot pan. As soon as it hits the oil in the hot pan, it dissolves, vanishes. That's our life. That's us. We're the meat. This world, that's the hot pan. He says that it's like our life is like a cow being led to slaughter. Every step bring it closer and closer to certain death. So this is what you see from the mountaintop, yeah? This is what you see. All of the things that we think are going to last forever, all of the things that we grasp so tightly to, these things we're going to have to let go of. So it puts things into perspective for us. It does sound perhaps a little bit grim, a little bit depressing perhaps. You've come here for a happy weekend and I'm telling you you're a piece of meat thrown into a hot pan, a cow led to slaughter. So you're probably wondering why, will you survive the survival camp? Will you survive this little talk? But I want you to know that there is good news. There is pleasure. So Buddhists, we do sometimes talk a lot about suffering, but not only is there a lot of suffering in the world to talk about, but there is a lot of getting over of our suffering. So the Buddhist path is actually a path of joy. I know I haven't done a good sell yet, but it is a path of joy and happiness. Why is it a path of joy and happiness? Because it's not the kind of happiness that we usually experience, the happiness that we try to get from the five senses. It's not that kind of happiness. That kind of happiness is the kind of happiness that is unstable, that is ownerless, that is unable to be permanent in our lives. That is the happiness that we can't rely upon. The senses are inherently unreliable. This is the pleasures of the mind, of the spiritual life, spiritual pleasures. So another sutta, the Bahuvedaniya Sutta, which is a sutta that talks about all the different types of feeling that we have in the world. And the Buddha talks about all the different types of pleasure to be experienced. And he says there's so many types of pleasure, but a person who has only experienced the five sense pleasures, they might think that this is the only type of pleasure to be experienced in the world. But the Buddha says, no, they're wrong. I wouldn't give them that at all. It's not the only type of pleasure to be experienced at all. There is a kind of pleasure much more sublime, much more refined than the five sense pleasures. And that is the pleasure of meditation. And he talks in this sutta about a gradually increasing level of pleasure with each deeper meditation state. Every deeper meditation state becoming more and more beautiful, more and more blissful. And you've probably heard Ajahn Brahm talking about meditation, and he calls it the bliss that is better than sex, better than drugs. Sometimes when you're sitting there feeling the aches in the body and pains, you might think, oh yeah, whatever. But stick with it and you'll see that there is actually a great deal of bliss to be had from your meditation practice. And the way to experience that is to be okay with letting go of those senses, being okay with letting go of those sense desires that keep us grasping, that keep the mind moving away from the present moment, that keep us moving away from contentment, that keep us moving away from stillness, calm, peace. The peace leads to pleasure and bliss if you let it. And the last story I'll tell tonight is about a former king, Bharia Kali Godaputta, who was living as a monk in the forest, alone, secluded, and he'd given up his kingdom, he'd given up all of his wealth, everything, to become a monk. So he'd gone on retreat, just like you, momentarily giving up everything, and he was sitting there meditating. Other monks were walking in the area where he was, and they heard him, and he was saying, "Aho Sukham, Aho Sukham." For those people who know their Pali, this means, "Oh, what bliss, what bliss." And these other monks thought, what is going on? Is he breaking some of his precepts, perhaps? What kind of bliss is this monk experiencing? And so they went and dobbed him into the Buddha. Or like, there's this monk and he's going, "Aho Sukham, Aho Sukham. Oh, what bliss, what bliss. What's going on?" So the Buddha says, "Go get him, bring him to me." And so they bring him to the Buddha. And the Buddha says, "Is it true that you were sitting in the forest saying, 'Oh, what bliss, oh, what bliss'?" And he says, yes, it is true." And the Buddha says, "Why? What was happening?" And he said, "Well, before I was a king, I had everything. I had treasures, I had wives, I had all the pleasures of life. But I gave it up to become a monk. I gave it up because I couldn't get any peace. I had all these treasures, but I was scared of losing them. I was powerful, but people wanted to kill me. I had a guard standing at my door. I never had even a single moment's peace." And so in the forest, retreating to the forest, renouncing, letting go all of these things, he found stillness, he found peace, he found the most beautiful bliss. And so this is an inspiring message for us. If a king can find some pleasure without any of his treasures, you can find some pleasure, some spiritual pleasure, some spiritual happiness here on this weekend retreat without any of the things, without any of the treasures that you have in your own lives. Just let them be outside there in the world. They'll still be there when you get back. So be here looking for spiritual pleasures in the next few days. The one thing to leave you with tonight is the image I want you to keep in your mind for the next few days, which is a turtle. So it comes from another sutta called the Kuma Sutta. So the turtle is being attacked by a jackal. So what does the turtle do? Tucks all its arms and legs and its head into its shell. And the Buddha says, this is like your senses. Just keep your senses restrained. And then the jackal cannot get a hold of you, cannot get you. In the same way, when you're here, just try to keep that phone off. Try to keep your mind at the center of your being. Not all the physical pleasures of the food, the nature. Don't go out looking for excitement and adventure. Just try to be content and still, like a turtle in a shell. So I like to do at the end of these talks a little recapitulation, just a kind of summing up. And it's good if we can close our eyes, we can do a quick, very short group meditation, tucking ourselves into our shell, closing our eyes, and finding again that sense of peace and stillness. So this life is like a dewdrop on a lotus leaf. A water bubble, a line drawn in the water. Knowing this, how will you live your life? What will your priorities be? Seeing the drawbacks and sense desire. Can you experience pleasure of renunciation? And just to finish thinking now, how can you use this skill of retreat in your life? And so we'll finish there tonight. Tomorrow morning, you're most welcome to come into the hall and meditate at 5:30. Many of you, I suspect, will be doing lying down meditation because you've had a busy working week, and that's okay. There's yoga at 6:30 and breakfast at 7:30. So that sounds pretty good already. We're going to pay respects to the Buddha now, and after that, if you wouldn't mind just helping out by taking your cushions or your chairs to the back of the rooms, stacking the cushions and the mats in the corner, so that tomorrow morning for yoga, the room is clear. If you come into the hall tomorrow, I'll be here. If you come in, just grab your cushions and sit wherever you want. Does that make sense? Yep. So let's pay respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and I wish you very good, sweet dreams, and enjoy being here at Jhana Grove. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagavan Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Supatipano bhagavato sāvaka sankho sanghang namami. Very good. So that's just a way for Buddhists, if you're not sure, just to pay respects to the triple gem, Buddha, the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, and the Sangha, the noble beings who have kept the teachings alive. So while you bow, if you're not comfortable bowing or anything like that, that's okay. So enjoy. See you in the morning. Do some more meditation maybe, or whatever.